Chapter 1. A Reunion Under Pressure. Mia Brooks stood before the gleaming glass tower of Blackwell Industries, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. Her usual white lab coat had been replaced by a navy blue business dress, but she still felt out of place in this world of luxury. 5 years ago, she never imagined she'd return here, let alone face Dominic Blackwell, the man who had once meant everything to her, and now stood as the cold CEO of a financial empire. But fate had given her no choice. Her family's company, Brooks and Sons, was on the brink of bankruptcy, and her father, battling liver cancer, could no longer carry the weight. Dominic was her only chance to save their legacy, and the livelihoods of dozens of employees depending on her. Mia took a deep breath, the same way she did before every intense surgery. As a renowned neurosurgeon, she was no stranger to pressure, to life-and-death decisions in the operating room. But this time, she wasn't wielding a scalpel. She was here to plead. She pushed open the door, the click of her heels echoing steadily on the marble floor. Dominic's secretary, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, led her to the top-floor office. The door opened. Dominic sat behind a black mahogany desk, afternoon sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shadows on his chiseled face. He was as handsome as she remembered, thick dark hair, ocean-deep blue eyes. But now he radiated cold authority. His black tailored suit fit like armor, shielding the man she once loved. He didn't look up right away, eyes still fixed on his screen, as if her presence was just another unimportant appointment. "Mia Brooks," he finally said, voice low and dry. "I thought you'd never set foot in this place again." Mia clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms to steady herself. "I'm not here for me, Dominic. I'm here for my family's company. Brooks and Sons is going under. My father, he's very sick. You're the only one who can help." Dominic leaned back in his chair, his eyes cutting across her like a blade. "And why should I help you, after everything you did?" His words sliced deep. Mia wanted to scream the truth, that 5 years ago, his mother had blackmailed her into walking away, forcing her to protect her family and medical career. But she stayed silent. What good would it do now? His mother, Margaret Blackwell, was still a force to be reckoned with, and Mia wouldn't risk her father paying the price again. "Because you can," she replied, voice firm. "Blackwell Industries has the resources to save Brooks and Sons. I know you're not in the business of charity, but this is an investment opportunity. The company has potential. It just needs a loan and restructuring." Dominic laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You're still sharp as ever, Mia, but I don't buy pretty speeches. If I help you, I want a price worth paying." Mia's stomach tightened. She'd braced for this, but her heart still trembled. "What's your price?" Dominic stood, walking slowly toward her. He towered over her, his presence like a silent storm drawing her in. "1 year," he said, voice so low it was almost a whisper. "You'll live with me, be my wife, legally on paper, and you'll give me a child, an heir." Mia froze as if the floor had collapsed beneath her. "You? What did you just say?" She took a step back, but Dominic's gaze pinned her in place. "Don't act surprised," he said, voice icy. "The board is circling after last year's scandal. A stable family, an heir. It'll strengthen my position. You need money. I need a child. This is a fair deal." Blood rushed to Mia's head. As a doctor, she had sworn to save lives, to protect humanity. But now he was asking her to turn her body, her future, into a contract clause. She wanted to scream at him, to say he'd become a monster. But then she thought of her father, bedridden, and the dozens of Brooks and Sons employees with families to feed, waiting on her to save their jobs. "You have no right to demand this," she said, voice trembling with fury. "I'm not some product for you to trade." "Then leave," Dominic said, turning back to his desk. "But don't expect me to lift a finger to help your family." Mia stood there, heart gripped by anguish. She thought of surgeries she'd performed, where one decision could change a person's fate. This time, her decision would change the fate of an entire family, and her own. "I want terms," she said, voice regaining the steadiness of a doctor used to bargaining with death. "After 1 year, I walk away, free. If I choose, I keep custody of the child, and you guarantee a full restructuring of Brooks and Sons, not just a loan. Dominic raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk crossing his lips. You still know how to play the game, Mia. He pulled open a drawer and took out a file. My lawyer will draft the contract. But remember this, once you sign, there's no going back. Mia looked into his eyes, searching for a trace of the Dominic she once loved. The boy who had held her hand under a star-filled sky and promised her the world. But the man before her now was a wall of ice, and she didn't know if his heart still beat for her or only out of vengeance. Then do it, she said coldly. Draw up the contract. I'll sign it. Dominic nodded, but as she turned to leave, his hand clenched under the desk. The sight of Mia, her brown hair tied high, those unwavering brown eyes, the confident stride of a life-saving doctor, stabbed at his heart. He hated her for leaving him 5 years ago without a word. But still, her strength, her fearless resolve, drew him in, just like the day they first met in that university lecture hall. As the door shut behind her, Dominic looked out the window at the city sprawling below. He had won this round, but why did it feel like he just lost everything? You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2. The Contract and the Painful Past. Mia sat in the cold, sterile conference room of Blackwell Industries, the harsh white fluorescent lights casting a stark glare on the stack of documents in front of her. The contract, thicker than she had expected, lay before her like a sentence. Every page was meticulously drafted, outlining the terms. She would live with Dominic Blackwell for 1 year, be his legal wife, and bear him a child, his heir. After that, she would be free, provided Brooks and Sons was saved, and she would have the right to custody if she chose. But as she picked up the pen, Mia's hand trembled. As a neurosurgeon, she had sworn to save lives, to protect human dignity. Now it felt like she was betraying that oath, selling her freedom to save her family. Dominic sat across from her, his deep blue eyes cold as ice. He said nothing, only watched her with thinly veiled contempt. "What are you hesitating for?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "Isn't this what you want? Money to save the company? To save your father? Or do you think you're somehow above it all?" His words cut like a blade, deep into Mia's heart. She wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't greedy, that 5 years ago she had sacrificed their love because she was forced to. But she bit her lip and stayed silent. His mother, Margaret Blackwell, still loomed like a shadow. Mia didn't dare imagine what she'd do if the truth came out, that Margaret had threatened to destroy her family's company, send her father to prison, and use her influence to revoke Mia's medical license if she didn't walk away from Dominic. "You don't know anything," Mia replied, her voice low but firm. "But if you think I'm here for the money, fine, I'll sign." Dominic curled his lip, his smile void of warmth. "You left me without a word, Mia. Disappeared right after I proposed. And now you come back, begging for money? Don't pretend to be noble. You're no different from the rest." His words stole her breath. Mia looked into his eyes, searching for even a fragment of the Dominic she once loved. The young man who had held her in their tiny college apartment and whispered promises to give her the world. But the man before her now was a stone wall, built from resentment and pain. She wanted to tell him the truth, but the fear of his mother's revenge, especially toward her ailing father, held her back. She picked up the pen and signed her name on the final page. The black ink bled into the paper, like blood from an invisible wound. "It's done," she said, sliding the contract back toward him. "Happy now?" Dominic took the document, flipping through a few pages, though his gaze never left her face. "Welcome to hell, Mia," he said, voice so cold it sent a chill down her spine. "From now on, you belong to me. 1 year, no more, no less." Mia rose to her feet, her legs heavy as lead. She wanted to leave that room to escape the sharpness of his gaze. But before she could move, memories crashed over her, pulling her into a storm of pain. 5 years ago, Stanford University. Mia, 24, wore her white coat as she stood in the medical library, reviewing notes for her final exams before graduation. Dominic, then an ambitious economics student, walked in with a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "You work too hard," he said, placing the flowers on her table. "But tonight, take a break. I have a surprise for you." That night, under the star-filled sky over the San Francisco Bay, Dominic knelt down and pulled out a simple silver ring. "Mia Brooks," he said, voice trembling with emotion, "you're the only one I want to spend my life with. Will you marry me?" Mia's heart stopped. She loved him enough to give up everything. But just days later, his mother, Margaret, showed up at her apartment. With silver hair and eyes sharp as blades, the woman sat down and placed a file in front of her. Documents detailing Brooks and Son's debt. "Leave my son," Margaret said, her voice calm but icy, "or your father's company will collapse. He could go to jail and forget practicing medicine. I have the influence to make sure you never hold a scalpel again." Mia had cried, pleaded, but Margaret didn't flinch. "You're not good enough for Dominic," she said. "Disappear, and I'll leave your family alone." Mia wrote a letter to Dominic, explaining everything, begging for forgiveness. She left it in his mailbox and walked away, never looking back. She never knew Margaret had taken the letter, burned it to ash, and let Dominic believe Mia had betrayed him, for selfish reasons. Mia returned to the present, standing at the door of the conference room. She realized her fists were clenched so tightly, her nails had drawn blood. As a doctor, she was used to pain, her patient's and her own. But this pain, standing before the man she once loved and being met with his scorn, was something she couldn't dissect or heal. Dominic stood, contract in hand, and walked past her. As he did, he paused, close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath, a strange contradiction to his frigid voice. "You'll move into my penthouse tonight," he said. "Don't be late. I hate waiting." Mia said nothing. She simply nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. When he left, she stood there alone in the empty room. She thought of her father, lying in his hospital bed, and of the employees at Brooks & Sons, people who believed she could save their jobs. She thought of the Hippocratic Oath, about preserving life, and wondered if signing this contract had broken it. But deep inside, a small part of Mia, the part that still loved Dominic, no matter how much she tried to bury it, whispered that she wasn't doing this just for her family. She was stepping into this game for herself too, to face her past, to prove that she wasn't as weak as he thought. She wiped her tears, lifted her chin, and walked out. She was a doctor. She knew how to rise after every fall, and she wasn't going to let Dominic Blackwell break her. Chapter 3. The First Night and Inner Turmoil. Dominic Blackwell's penthouse sat atop a gleaming tower in the heart of the city, its glass walls offering a sweeping view of glittering urban lights. The luxurious interior, white leather sofas, marble tables, crystal chandeliers, only made Mia Brooks feel colder. She stood in the vast living room, arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to hold on to a shred of warmth in this unfamiliar space. As a neurosurgeon, Mia was used to long nights in hospitals, confronting life-and-death pressure. But here in Dominic's territory, she felt like a prisoner of the very contract she had signed. Dominic sat on the sofa a few feet away, a glass of whiskey in hand, his eyes sweeping over her with chilling indifference. Since she had moved in earlier that evening, he had said little beyond curt instructions. "Your room is at the end of the hall. Don't disturb me unless necessary." He treated her like a contractual obligation, nothing more. But sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes flashed with a hint of pain, as if he too was fighting an internal war. Mia tried to remain composed, but her heart pounded wildly. She had braced for his coldness, but she hadn't expected it to hurt this much. She wanted to break the silence, to scream that she wasn't the traitor he believed her to be. But instead, she sat down on the armchair across from him, clutching her medical bag, a habit born from always being prepared for emergencies. "Long day at the hospital?" Dominic asked suddenly, his voice dry, though not entirely contemptuous. He took a sip of whiskey, eyes still on the glass. Mia blinked, surprised that he'd started a conversation. She nodded, her voice quiet but steady. "An 8-hour surgery, A little girl, 6 years old, brain tumor. We saved her. She hadn't planned to say much, but the words spilled out as a way to calm herself. She woke up before I left the OR. Her smile, it reminded me why I chose this job. She stopped, realizing she was revealing too much. As a doctor, she prided herself on her rationality, her emotional control in the operating room. But here, in front of Dominic, she felt vulnerable. Dominic said nothing, but his gaze softened for a brief second. He looked at her as if seeing the Mia from 5 years ago, the girl who had spoken so passionately about saving lives, the girl he had once loved with abandon. He stood, walked to a corner bookshelf and retrieved a bottle of red wine. "Drink with me," he said. It wasn't a request, it was nearly a command. Mia hesitated, then accepted the glass he handed her. She needed something to dull the ache in her chest. They sat in silence, sipping their drinks, soft jazz humming from the built-in speakers. The wine lightened her mind, and memories came flooding back. Nights they had spent together during college, laughing, dreaming, sharing their futures. She looked at Dominic, and for a fleeting moment, he wasn't the ruthless CEO. He was the boy who once held her hand under the stars. Dominic set down his glass, his eyes locking onto hers. He walked back to the bookshelf and pulled out a worn leather notebook. "Do you remember this?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. He opened it, revealing handwritten notes on neurology, Mia's handwriting from when she was studying for graduation. "You left it in my apartment. I kept it, as a reminder of the one who betrayed me." Mia felt her heart fracture. She wanted to explain, to tell him she hadn't left because she stopped loving him, but because his mother had forced her. But the wine and the pain clogged her throat. She shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "You don't understand, Dominic. You never did." Maybe it was the wine or the memories, but in the next moment, Dominic was standing in front of her, his hand brushing her cheek, his fingers warm against her chilled skin. "Then explain," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Why did you leave me?" Mia didn't answer. She simply looked into his eyes and saw the same pain reflected back at her. And then, like a wave they couldn't resist, they kissed. It was a kiss of passion and pain, of longing and resentment. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest as if afraid she'd vanish again. Mia responded, even knowing this was a mistake. She let herself drown in him, in the memories, in the man she once loved. They fell onto the sofa, clothes slipping to the floor. That night, they belonged to each other, not because of the contract, but because of what they once had and what they had lost. But when it was over, reality returned like a slap in the face. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the glass wall, waking Mia. She lay on the sofa, a thin blanket draped over her, her body sore and her heart shattered. Dominic was gone. On the table sat the old notebook. And a note, "Don't confuse this. It's just part of the contract." Mia clutched the blanket, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She hated herself for being weak, for failing at the most important surgery of her life, her own heart. As a doctor, she had always taken pride in her control, her ability to remain calm when a life depended on her. But last night, she had let emotion win, and now she was paying the price. She stood, wiped her tears, and dressed. She didn't take the notebook. It belonged to the past, and she couldn't let it drag her down again. She stepped into the bathroom, washed away the remnants of the night, and told herself she would survive this year, not for Dominic, but for her father, for the employees of Brooks and Sons, and for herself. But as she left the penthouse for the hospital, a small part of her, the part that still loved Dominic, whispered that she wasn't just fighting him, she was fighting her own heart. Chapter 4. Pregnancy and the Mission of Motherhood. Mia stood in her private office at the hospital holding the pregnancy test, her eyes fixed on the two unmistakably pink lines. As a neurosurgeon, she understood the meaning better than anyone. A new life was forming inside her, a responsibility she couldn't escape. But her heart was heavy, not with the joy of impending motherhood, but with the weight of the contract she had signed with Dominic Blackwell. This child wasn't just hers. It was the heir he had demanded, part of the bargain made to save her family's company. She sank into a chair, inhaling deeply, trying to steady herself like she would before stepping into an operating room. As a doctor, she was used to analyzing situations and making decisions under pressure. She told herself she'd manage this pregnancy the way she wielded a scalpel, with precision, logic, and no emotional interference. But when she thought of Dominic, of that night 2 months ago, filled with both passion and pain in his penthouse, her resolve faltered. He had left the next morning with a cold note. "Don't confuse this. It's just part of the contract." That sentence haunted her, like a wound that refused to heal. Mia chose to keep her distance from Dominic, sticking strictly to the terms of the agreement. She still lived in his penthouse but avoided him, focusing on her hospital work and monitoring her father's health from afar. She did her own research on prenatal care, conducted regular checkups at her hospital, and followed a strict nutritional plan. As a doctor, she didn't need anyone interfering with her body, especially not Dominic. But Dominic didn't let her be. One afternoon, just after finishing surgery, Mia found a middle-aged woman waiting outside her office. "Doctor Brooks, I'm Dr. Clara Carter, an obstetric specialist," the woman introduced herself, her tone professional. "Mr. Blackwell has hired me to oversee your pregnancy." Mia was stunned, then furious. "I don't need a private doctor," she said sharply. "I'm a doctor. I know how to take care of myself." Dr. Carter gave a polite smile. "I understand, but Mr. Blackwell was very insistent. He's also arranged for security detail and requested that you move into his main estate in the suburbs by the weekend." Blood rushed to Mia's head. That evening, she returned to the penthouse, determined to confront Dominic. He was standing in the living room, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows, his usual glass of whiskey in hand. The city lights reflected across his face, highlighting his cold, sharp features. "You don't get to control me like this," Mia said, her voice trembling with anger. "I'm pregnant. Yes, according to the contract. But I don't need a private doctor. I don't need bodyguards, and I certainly don't need to move out of here into your estate." Dominic turned to face her, his eyes briefly pausing on her still flat stomach. They both knew the truth. "This isn't about you," he replied, his voice low and cutting. "It's about the child, my heir. I won't take any risks." His words stabbed her, a reminder that to him, this child was just a contractual clause. But she wouldn't back down. "I'm a neurosurgeon, Dominic. I've saved hundreds of lives. You think I'm not capable of protecting my own child?" Dominic stepped closer, narrowing the space between them. "I don't doubt your abilities," he said, his tone softer, almost a whisper. "But I don't take risks. Not with this child." Mia stared into his eyes, searching for some trace of emotion, care, even the faintest warmth. But all she saw was a guarded intensity. She wanted to scream, to ask why he was going to such lengths if he only saw her as a tool. But instead she spoke coolly. "Then say it. Is this about the child, or is this about controlling me?" Dominic didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered just for a moment. He turned away, took a sip of whiskey, and said flatly, "You'll move by the weekend." The day Mia moved into the estate, she felt like she was entering a gilded prison. The mansion was vast, with long hallways and lush gardens, but all she felt was suffocation. Dominic wasn't there, but his presence lingered everywhere. Guards stationed discreetly, meal plans drafted by a nutritionist, scheduled prenatal appointments with Dr. Carter. Mia tried to retain her autonomy, double-checking everything with her medical knowledge. But Dominic's quiet control disoriented her. He never spoke of love, never showed affection, but every action, from ensuring she had a sunlit room to sending daily baskets of organic fruit, spoke of care that went beyond contract terms. One evening, while reading medical journals in the estate's library, Mia stumbled upon an old photograph on a shelf. It was her and Dominic during college, smiling by the beach. She picked it up, her fingers brushing the image of his face, one that didn't yet wear the scars of bitterness. Her chest tightened. As a doctor, she knew how to heal bodies, but how did one mend a broken heart? Dominic entered the room, startling her. He glanced at the photo in her hand, his eyes darkening. "You shouldn't be going through my things," he said, not angrily, just tiredly. "I didn't mean to," Mia replied, setting the photo down. She wanted to ask why he still kept it, why he cared so much if he only saw her as a contract. But instead, she simply said, "Thank you for everything. But I need space, Dominic. I'm not your prisoner." He looked at her long enough that she thought he might not respond. "You're not a prisoner," he finally said, his voice rough. "But you're the mother of my child, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect both of you." His words unsettled her. She wanted to believe he cared, but the memory of his cold message after their night together kept her guarded. She nodded and turned away, but her heart was a mess. She understood the changes in her body brought by pregnancy. But what she didn't understand was why her heart still beat for him, the man who was both her protector and her captor. Chapter 5. The Hidden Truth. Mia sat in the hospital break room, the fluorescent lights overhead highlighting the exhaustion on her face. The morning surgery, a complex brain tumor case, had taken longer than expected, but the patient was finally out of danger. As a neurosurgeon, Mia always found comfort in moments like this, when she had saved a life. But today her heart felt heavy. Her pregnancy had entered its 8th month, and the pressure from the contract with Dominic Blackwell made her feel like she was walking a tightrope, ready to snap at any moment. She sank into a chair, cradling a lukewarm cup of coffee. Dr. Sarah Kim, a neurologist and Mia's closest colleague, stepped in and set a box of cookies on the table. "You look like you just ran a marathon," Sarah teased gently, her voice full of concern. "Pregnant, a neurosurgeon, and living with a cold billionaire? Mia, are you secretly a superhero?" Mia gave a faint smile, but pain flickered in her eyes. Sarah always had a way of opening her up, and today she couldn't hold it in any longer. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Sarah," she whispered. "Dominic? He's not the man I used to love, but sometimes I see how he takes care of me, and I wonder if there's still something left of the man he once was. Then I remember, it's just a contract, and 5 years ago, I didn't have a choice. I had to leave him." Sarah frowned, sitting across from her. "Didn't have a choice? What do you mean?" Mia took a deep breath, like she was prepping for surgery. "His mother, Margaret Blackwell, she threatened me. If I didn't leave Dominic, she said she'd destroy my father's company and use her connections to get my medical license revoked. I wrote Dominic a letter explaining everything, begging for forgiveness, but he never got it. And now I'm too scared to tell him the truth. I'm afraid she'll come after my family again." Sarah's jaw dropped, but before she could respond, the emergency alert rang. Mia stood quickly, pushing her emotions aside as she slipped back into the role of surgeon. What she didn't know was that Dominic was standing just outside the hallway, hand clenched around his phone, face pale. He had come to pick Mia up for her scheduled prenatal checkup with Dr. Carter, but had unintentionally overheard the entire conversation through the slightly ajar door. Dominic drove back to the estate, his mind spinning. Mia's words echoed in his head. "She threatened me. I wrote a letter." He wanted to believe it was a lie, a convenient excuse for why she had abandoned him 5 years ago. But part of him, the part that still loved her, no matter how deeply buried, whispered that it could be true. He pressed the gas, the Bentley tearing down the highway as if speed could drown out the fury and pain building inside him. That night, Dominic arrived at his mother's estate on the city's outskirts. Margaret Blackwell sat in the living room, a glass of red wine in hand, her silver hair tied neatly, radiating her usual unshakable power. "You don't come this late just to see your mother," she said calmly, her sharp eyes studying him. Dominic didn't bother with pleasantries. "What did you do to Mia 5 years ago?" he asked, his voice low and firm. "Did you threaten her, her family, her career? And did you take the letter she wrote to me?" Margaret raised a brow, setting her wine down, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Dominic, what are you talking about? Threats? Letters? She left you without a word, and now you believe her made-up sob story? She's a smart doctor, son. She knows how to manipulate sympathy." Her denial hit him like a punch to the chest. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. "Don't lie to me," he growled. "I heard her telling a colleague. She didn't know I was there. She said you had someone threaten her family and that you took the letter she left for me." Margaret laughed, a dry, hollow sound. My son, you're being sentimental. Mia Brooks is ambitious. She left because she didn't want to be tied down. These threats are just her excuse to worm her way back into your life, especially now that her family is broke. Do you honestly believe I would stoop so low for a girl like her? Dominic felt his head spin. Her explanation made sense. Too much sense. Margaret had always been powerful and proud. She would never admit to something underhanded, and her calm denial shook his certainty. But Mia's face, the pain in her eyes as she recounted the past, the way she gently touched her stomach when she thought no one was watching, kept him from fully believing his mother. I'll find out the truth, he said quietly but firmly. And if you lied, there will be consequences. Margaret shrugged, taking another sip of wine. Do what you must, Dominic, but don't let a woman cloud your judgment. You're the head of Blackwell Industries. Don't forget that. The next day, Dominic sat in his office and called his private attorney, Henry Voss. Find everything connected to Mia Brooks and my mother from 5 years ago, he ordered. Emails, texts, bank transfers, anything. I want to know exactly what happened. He also contacted a former employee of his mother's, someone who had once handled her private matters, and requested an investigation into any suspicious activity related to the Brooks family. He couldn't stop thinking about Mia. Every time he saw her in the estate, quietly studying medical texts, tirelessly working despite her pregnancy, his heart wavered, but doubt still clung to him. Why hadn't she told him the truth now? If she was innocent, why keep silent, especially when they were living under the same roof? He couldn't afford to let his emotions take over, not when the wound from 5 years ago still throbbed. Meanwhile, Mia returned to the estate after her shift, unaware that Dominic had overheard her secret. She entered her room, sat on the bed, and rested a hand on her belly. As a doctor, she understood that this child was a part of her, contract or not. But when she thought of Dominic, his conflicted care, his eyes occasionally betraying pain, she felt torn. She wanted to believe he cared, but she feared it was only an illusion. She stood, staring out the window as moonlight spilled across the quiet garden. She reminded herself to stay strong, for the baby, for her family, and for herself. But she didn't know the truth she'd hidden was already unraveling. And when it finally came to light, it could change everything or destroy them all. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Chapter 6. A Child Born in the Storm. A snowstorm howled outside St. Mary's Hospital, wind shrieking against the window panes as if trying to swallow the city whole. Mia lay on the bed in the maternity ward, her breathing ragged, her hands gripping the hospital sheets. She was in labor, nearly 3 weeks early, and the pain was fiercer than any surgery she'd ever performed. As a neurosurgeon, Mia was used to operating under pressure, but now she was the patient, and the control she once took pride in was slipping away. Dr. Clara stood beside her, calmly directing the medical team. Dr. Sarah Kim held Mia's hand for reassurance. The maternity ward at St. Mary's was well equipped, but the historic blizzard had disrupted transportation, preventing some staff from reaching the hospital. The team on hand, Clara, Sarah, 2 nurses, and 1 anesthesiologist, were stretched thin but focused. Mia, deep breaths, stay with the rhythm, Clara instructed, monitoring the fetal heart rate on the screen. You're almost there. Mia clenched her teeth, trying to focus on Clara's voice, but the pain blurred her vision. She knew preterm labor came with risks, and her worry for the baby outweighed any concern for herself. Is the heartbeat okay? She whispered, voice barely audible. Clara nodded with calm reassurance. Yes, Mia, the baby's strong. You need to push, now. Mia tightened her grip on Sarah's hand, summoning every ounce of strength. She thought of the baby, her baby, a life she had vowed to protect, contract or not. She thought of her father, still battling cancer, and the employees of Brooks & Sons who counted on her. But even amid the pain, Dominic's face haunted her, his conflicted gaze, his moments of care. She wondered if he would come. A few miles away, Dominic sat in the conference room of Blackwell Industries, his phone buzzing repeatedly. He was in the middle of a tense board meeting when his mother, Margaret, called. "Dominic, listen to me," she said urgently. "Mia is not worth risking everything. She's manipulating you." Dominic gripped the phone, rage rising. He had been investigating ever since overhearing Mia's conversation, but still hadn't found solid proof of his mother's threats. Margaret's continued denial unsettled him, but he couldn't forget Mia's quiet strength during pregnancy, the tenderness in her touch as she held her belly. He was about to hang up when a message from Sarah appeared. "Mia's in labor. St. Mary's. It's urgent." His heart stopped. He bolted from the meeting room, ignoring the startled board members. Outside, the snow blanketed the roads, traffic at a standstill. He sped through slippery streets, wind howling through the cracks in his car windows. But nothing scared him more than the thought of being too late. In the delivery room, Mia was exhausted. Clara and the team moved swiftly, but the storm caused a brief power outage, forcing them to switch to backup generators. With one final agonizing scream, Mia felt the baby leave her body. A faint cry pierced the room, and Clara exclaimed, "It's a girl! Mia, you did it!" Sarah laughed through tears. "A beautiful little girl." The nurses quickly cleaned the newborn and wrapped her in a warm blanket, preparing to transfer her to the NICU due to her early arrival. But something was wrong. A sudden warmth flooded over Mia, and her body went limp. Clara immediately recognized the signs. "Postpartum hemorrhage," she shouted. "Check the uterus. Administer oxytocin and start a transfusion. O-negative stat." As a doctor, Mia understood the gravity. Severe bleeding caused by uterine atony could lead to hypovolemic shock, or worse. She fought to stay conscious. "Clara, save my baby," she whispered. Clara turned to her, eyes steady. "We'll save both of you, Mia. You're a doctor. You know we don't give up." The team sprang into action. Clara injected oxytocin to stimulate uterine contractions. Nurses prepped blood units, and the anesthesiologist monitored Mia's plummeting blood pressure. Sarah held Mia's hand, her voice shaking. "You're strong, Mia. Stay with us." Darkness closed in. In her final moment of consciousness, Mia thought of her baby girl, and a name passed through her lips. Lily? Dominic burst through the doors of St. Mary's, coat soaked with snow, breath ragged. He sprinted down the maternity corridor, heart pounding. Outside the delivery room, Sarah stood pale and bloodstained. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Sarah met his eyes, stricken. "Mia gave birth to a baby girl, but she's hemorrhaging. Clara and the team are working, but she's lost a lot of blood." Dominic's legs nearly gave out. He shoved past the doors despite Sarah's protest. Inside, Mia lay unconscious, blood transfusion lines running into her arms, machines beeping urgently. Clara was applying uterine massage to control the bleeding, nurses moving with practiced urgency. A nurse gently carried the tiny baby girl, wrapped in blankets, to the NICU. Dominic caught a glimpse of her face, so small, so angelic, and his heart shattered. But when he turned to Mia, terror gripped him. He dropped to his knees beside her, taking her hand, cold and limp, into his own. "Mia," he whispered, voice hoarse, "don't leave me. Not again." He didn't care about the contract, the air, or the board. None of it mattered. What mattered was the truth. He had never stopped loving her. All the anger, the mistrust, they had been walls to hide the pain of losing her 5 years ago. Sarah entered quietly and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Clara's the best. Mia's strong. She'll make it." Dominic nodded, but he didn't look away. He stayed at Mia's side through the night, hand in hers. Their daughter, Lily, the name Sarah had mentioned, was safe in the NICU. And Dominic whispered to Mia, even though she couldn't hear him, "I'm sorry, Mia. I was wrong. Please come back. To me, to our daughter." By dawn, the snowstorm had begun to calm. Clara entered exhausted but relieved. "She's stable now. The bleeding's under control, but she needs rest." Dominic nodded, eyes red, feeling helpless for the first time in years. He knew even when Mia woke, the wounds between them would still be there. But he made a vow in that quiet morning light. He would earn her forgiveness, not for the contract, not for redemption, but for love, the love he had denied for too long. Chapter 7. Escape and a New Beginning. Mia sat in her hospital room at St. Mary's, pale sunlight streaming through the window, casting a soft glow on her tired face. 2 weeks had passed since the harrowing childbirth that nearly claimed her life due to postpartum hemorrhage. Baby Lily, her tiny premature daughter, was now stable in the neonatal unit, with deep blue eyes just like Dominic's. As a neurosurgeon, Mia understood how lucky she was to be alive, but her heart still felt shattered. Dominic had stayed by her side the entire time she was unconscious, holding her hand and whispering apologies. But once she awoke, he reverted to his cold, distant self, as if afraid to show his true feelings. She looked at Lily's ultrasound photo, tucked into her medical notebook. As a doctor, she had sworn to protect life, and now she knew she had to protect Lily, not just from health risks, but from the contract that had bound her to Dominic Blackwell. She had fulfilled her part, borne the child, saved her family's company. But living in his mansion, under his gaze, a gaze filled with both love and resentment, was something she could no longer endure. Mia made her decision. She would leave, take Lily, and start over. She contacted Dr. Sarah Kim, her closest colleague, and the one who had stayed with her through labor. With her connections in the medical community, Sarah promised to help hide Mia's whereabouts. "Are you sure about this, Mia?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern. "Dominic is a billionaire. He'll find you." "I have to do this, Sarah," Mia replied, steady and resolute. "For Lily and for me." Sarah arranged for Mia to be transferred to a small hospital in Portland, Oregon, under the guise of joining a community health project. A trusted physician there agreed to keep Mia's identity confidential, ensuring no one could trace her back to St. Mary's. Mia wrote a short letter and left it on the hospital room's desk. "Dominic, I've fulfilled the contract. Don't look for us." Mia, no explanations, no apologies, just a plea for freedom. 3 days later, Mia and Lily left St. Mary's under the cover of night, in a car Sarah had arranged. When their plane landed in Portland, Mia felt a breath of new air wash over her. She temporarily stepped away from her medical career, not out of lost passion, but to shield Lily from Dominic's reach. To begin healing, Mia turned to art. She started painting, vivid emotional canvases that captured both pain and hope. Under the pseudonym E.B., she opened a small gallery in Portland's Arts District, a quiet place where she could raise Lily and rediscover herself. Painting became her release, a balm for the years of surgical pressure, where every decision had meant life or death. Each brush stroke whispered her truth. She painted snowstorms, piercing blue eyes, and winding roads that symbolized freedom, but sometimes she paused, watching Lily sleep in her crib, and wondered if she was really running from Dominic or from her own heart. Meanwhile, at Dominic's estate, he stood in Mia's now empty bedroom, her letter clenched in his hand. "Don't look for us." Those words sliced through him. He had discovered her disappearance during a hospital visit, only to find the bed empty and that cold note. He'd gone mad, calling every contact he had, from private investigators to hospital administrators, but no one knew where Mia had gone. When he confronted Sarah, she had simply said, "She needs space, Dominic." Respect that. But Dominic couldn't stop. He visited every hospital Mia had ever worked at, from St. Mary's to her medical residency programs. He questioned colleagues, checked records, but her trail vanished like snow in a storm. Regret devoured him. He remembered the nights by her bedside, begging her to wake up. He had realized then that he loved her, but never got the chance to say it. At the same time, Dominic continued investigating the past. He contacted his attorney, Henry Voss, who finally tracked down Margaret Blackwell's former personal secretary, Alice Carter, who had resigned 5 years earlier. Dominic flew to Chicago, where Alice now lived, and confronted her. Under pressure, Alice confessed, "Mrs. Margaret hired people to threaten the Brooks family. I transferred funds to a law firm to put pressure on Brooks and Sons. And there was a letter. Mia wrote to you, but Mrs. Margaret ordered me to burn it." Dominic felt the ground fall out from beneath him. The truth he had suspected since overhearing Mia was now undeniable. His mother had destroyed their love, and he had blamed Mia all these years. He returned to the estate and confronted Margaret, but she remained cold and unmoved. "You're destroying yourself over a girl who isn't worthy, Dominic." But he no longer believed her. He cut all ties with his mother and redirected all his resources to finding Mia. He hired more detectives, scoured financial records, but she had vanished. Every night he stared at an old college photo of them together, cursing himself for letting anger blind him to love. 3 months later, a flicker of hope emerged. One of Dominic's assistants handed him an invitation from Portland, an art exhibit by a new artist signing as E.B. Dominic's heart pounded. E.B. Emma Brooks. He remembered the sketches Mia used to draw in college, the expressive lines she used to ease the stress of medical school. Without hesitation, he booked the next flight. In Portland, Mia stood in her small gallery, admiring the paintings on the wall. Lily, now healthy and thriving, slept peacefully in her stroller beside her. Mia smiled, feeling a rare peace after months on the run. As a doctor, she had learned how to heal bodies, but art had helped her begin to heal her soul. She had no idea that somewhere nearby, Dominic Blackwell was drawing closer, with truth, regret, and a heart still aching for her. Chapter 8. Reunion in Portland. The small gallery nestled in Portland's Arts District glowed with warm golden light, its walls lined with paintings, each brushstroke telling a story of pain and hope. Mia stood in the center of the room, wearing a soft linen dress the color of pale blue skies, holding baby Lily in her arms. The 3-month-old had Dominic's piercing blue eyes and a head of gently curled brown hair. Soft acoustic music mingled with the quiet murmur of guests attending the debut exhibit of E.B. Once a neurosurgeon who believed her life would always be defined by operating rooms, Mia had found healing in art during the months she spent fleeing from Dominic Blackwell. She looked down at Lily and smiled as the baby cooed softly. Portland had offered her a new beginning, but she was considering returning to medicine. A local hospital had reached out, offering her a position in their community neurosurgery program. The thought of holding a scalpel again filled her with both anticipation and fear. If Dominic found her, he might try to take control of her life again, as he once had during her pregnancy. She couldn't allow the contract, or the lingering feelings for him, to steal her freedom again. The gallery door opened quietly, and a tall figure stepped inside. Mia turned and her heart stopped. Dominic Blackwell stood there, dressed in a fitted black suit, but his deep blue eyes, so like Lily's, were filled with exhaustion and longing. He no longer looked like the cold CEO she once faced, but like a man worn down by months of desperate searching. Mia clutched Lily tighter, instinctively protective. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice firm but trembling. "We don't need you." Dominic stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers, or Lily's. When he looked at the baby, pain flickered across his face. She's my daughter," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Mia, I've been searching everywhere. I know the truth now. My mother threatened you. She burned your letter. I'm sorry for everything." Mia's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment 100 times, Dominic finding her, admitting his mistakes. But the reality was sharper, more vulnerable than she'd prepared for. She stepped back, holding Lily more tightly. "You're too late," she said, her voice cold even as tears threatened. "I fulfilled the contract. Lily and I don't belong to you." People in the gallery began to take notice, but Dominic didn't care. He dropped to his knees right there, in the middle of the gallery, drawing startled glances. "Mia," he said, voice shaking but resolute, "I was wrong. I let hatred blind me. I'm not here because of the contract. I'm here for you and our daughter. I want to be Lily's father. I want to be your husband, not on paper, but from the heart." His words pierced her like a blade, sweet and painful all at once. Mia's heart raced. She was a doctor, trained to make life or death decisions under pressure. But with Dominic, she couldn't see clearly. She remembered the days he sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand while she lay unconscious. She remembered the look in his eyes when he first saw Lily. But she also remembered his cold note after their night together, the control he exerted over her pregnancy. She couldn't trust him. Not yet. "Words are easy, Dominic," she said, voice unsteady. "But I lost everything because of you, because of your mother, because of that contract. I'm rebuilding my life. I'm considering going back to medicine, creating a future for Lily and myself." How do I know you won't interfere again? That you won't pull us back into your world? Dominic bowed his head, his hands clenched on the gallery floor. I walked away from a multi-billion-dollar deal to be here, he said quietly. The board wants to remove me. I don't care. I only care about you and Lily. If you want to go back to medicine, I'll support you. If you want to stay in Portland, I'll stay too. Just give me a chance to prove it. Mia's tears fell, but she wiped them quickly. She looked down at Lily, then back at Dominic, the man who had once been everything, then her enemy, and now knelt before her, begging for forgiveness. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of being hurt again was too strong. As a doctor, she knew how to heal the body, but the heart was infinitely more complex. I can't decide right now, she said, voice steady, her strength returning. If you've truly changed, prove it. Not with words, with time. Stay in Portland. Live like a normal man. Let me see who you are. Without the CEO, without the contract. Dominic nodded, a flicker of hope lighting his eyes. I will, Mia, as long as it takes. He stood slowly but didn't come closer, respecting the boundary she'd set. He glanced at Lily again, a bittersweet smile crossing his lips. She looks like you, but her eyes, those are mine. Mia didn't reply. She just held Lily closer and turned back to the gallery guests, her heart in turmoil. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but for the first time, she saw a different Dominic, not the controlling one, but a man willing to surrender power for love. Dominic left the gallery and stepped into the Portland streets, blanketed in golden autumn leaves. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Cancel all meetings in New York, relocate my office, temporarily, to Portland. He rented a modest apartment near the Arts District, determined to live the life Mia asked for. No power, no luxury. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but he was ready. For Lily, for Mia, for the love he'd realized far too late. Back in the gallery, Mia stood before one of her paintings, a snowstorm fading beneath golden light. She thought of medicine, of Lily, and of Dominic. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. No one else would decide her life for her again. As a doctor, a mother, and a woman, she would choose her own path. Chapter 9. Redemption and Reunion. Portland was bathed in golden autumn light, maple leaves drifting gently along its narrow streets. Mia stood in the consultation room of the local community hospital, dressed in a white lab coat, patient chart in hand. After 3 months in Portland, she had begun working part-time as a neurosurgeon again, taking on simpler surgeries and consulting with patients. As a doctor, she found joy in healing others, and the work reignited the passion that had once been dulled by her contract with Dominic Blackwell. But each time she returned to her small apartment, where baby Lily was growing strong and healthy, Mia couldn't help but think of Dominic, the man who had stayed in Portland, living like an ordinary man to prove he had changed. Dominic had rented a modest apartment just a few blocks from Mia's gallery, giving up the luxury of his estate in the power of Blackwell Industries. In Portland, he wasn't a CEO. He was a clumsy first-time father and a man seeking redemption. He respected Mia's boundaries, never pushing her to meet, but regularly sent small gifts for Lily, a stuffed bear, a picture book, with handwritten notes, for Daddy's little princess. One afternoon, Mia agreed to let Dominic meet Lily at a park near her home. She sat on a bench watching as he awkwardly cradled the baby and sang a lullaby he'd clearly just learned. Lily giggled, gripping his finger tightly, and Mia felt her heart stir. Dominic was no longer the cold, controlling man who had once forced her into a contract. He was now a man willing to do anything for his child, and maybe for her. But Dominic didn't stop at fatherhood. Quietly, he launched a community healthcare fund, donating advanced equipment to Mia's hospital and local free clinics around Portland. He brought her a proposal one evening at her gallery, a folder in hand. I want this fund to focus on pediatric neurosurgery, he said earnestly. You're the expert. I need your input to do this right. Mia was surprised not just by the scale of the initiative, but by how he respected her professional voice. As a doctor, she had always prided herself on her ability to save lives. Dominic seeking her counsel, not as a favor but out of genuine respect, made her see him in a new light. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her tone wary. "To win me over?" Dominic shook his head, his gaze gentle but unwavering. "Because it's the right thing to do. For you, for Lily, and for the people you help. I was wrong to control you. Now, I just want to support you." His words left her shaken. She remembered when he had hired private doctors and bodyguards to control her every move. But this Dominic was different. He listened, he learned, and he placed her above his power. One evening, Mia invited Dominic over for dinner. For the first time since she had left, she cooked a simple meal, pasta and salad. Lily slept peacefully in the next room. Dominic brought a children's book about the human body, full of bright illustrations. "I read this to Lily," he said, smiling awkwardly. "I thought she should know her mom is a brilliant doctor." Mia laughed, the first time she'd felt at ease with him in a long time. Over dinner, Dominic shared stories of how he'd learned to change diapers and calm Lily during her late-night fussing. He was clumsy, but full of love, and Mia realized he wasn't just trying to earn her back. He truly wanted to be a father. She looked at him, and in that moment, she saw the Dominic she'd fallen in love with in college, the man who had once given her his whole heart. After dinner, they sat on the sofa, glasses of red wine on the table between them. Mia took a deep breath and gathered her courage. "Dominic," she said softly but firmly, "I've seen the changes in you. You're not the man who once forced me into a contract, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid if I let you in again, I'll lose myself." Dominic took her hand, gently but firmly. "Mia, I lost you once because I was a fool. I won't let that happen again. I don't want a contract. I don't want control. I want you and Lily, a family built on love, not paper." His words reached deep into her heart. As a doctor, Mia was used to making life or death decisions. But this was the hardest choice of all, to forgive or to keep running. She looked into his eyes and saw truth. He had proven himself, not just with words, but with his actions. 3 months in Portland, the medical fund, the awkward, tender love he gave Lily every day. "I'll give you a chance," she whispered, voice trembling. "But no contracts, Dominic. Only love. If you ever hurt me or Lily again, I'll walk away. And this time, you won't find us." Dominic nodded, eyes gleaming with joy and resolve. "I swear, Mia, I won't let you down." He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in 5 years, Mia let herself fall into his embrace. Not because of obligation, but because her heart was finally ready to trust again. They kissed, gently yet deeply, a silent promise of what could be. A month in Portland had changed Dominic. He continued working on the healthcare fund, collaborating with Mia to expand support for underprivileged patients. He visited the hospital where she worked, bringing coffee and waiting outside the OR for her like a friend, like a partner. With Lily, he was a devoted father, reading children's medical books every night and humming lullabies with his imperfect voice. Mia watched him, and each day, she saw more of the man she once loved. Not the ruthless CEO, but the Dominic of simpler, truer days. Mia found herself again, too. Her part-time work reignited her purpose, and she began planning to open a community neurology clinic with the fund Dominic created. She no longer feared his interference because he had proven his respect. For her, not only as Lily's mother, but as a doctor and as a woman. As their second month in Portland began, Mia knew she had made the right choice. She and Dominic weren't rushing things, but each step they took together was a quiet declaration. Their love, once buried under pain and resentment, was being rebuilt, stronger than ever before. You're watching Soul Stories, exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 10. Family in the Future. The coast of Maine glowed under the golden hues of sunset, gentle waves lapping against the sandy beach. A small wedding unfolded on the cliffs, white ribbons fluttering in the breeze and wildflowers adorning the tables. Mia Brooks stood in a simple wedding dress, her brown hair cascading freely, her eyes bright with happiness. Beside her was Dominic Blackwell, dressed in a fitted gray suit, a rare radiant smile lighting up his once cold face. Little Lily, now over a year old, ran joyfully along the sand, chasing tiny waves and calling out gleefully, "Mommy! Daddy!" A year ago, Mia could never have imagined this moment. She had run from Dominic, believed him her enemy, and feared that love would destroy her again. But now, as he held her hand, she knew they had moved past resentment and rebuilt their love from broken pieces. As a neurosurgeon, Mia was used to facing difficult surgeries, but learning to forgive and trust Dominic had been the greatest challenge of her life. Dominic leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her lips, his eyes filled with adoration. "All I need is you and our daughter Mia," he whispered. "No contracts. Nothing else." She smiled, tightening her grip on his hand, feeling the sincerity in every word. This wedding had no legal bindings, no conditions, only love. The love they had reclaimed through pain and perseverance. After reuniting in Portland, Mia and Dominic moved to Maine, where they began building a life together. Mia returned to full-time work at St. Mary's Hospital, the place where she had once nearly died giving birth to Lily. She led a neurosurgery program, saving dozens of lives each month. The work was demanding, both physically and emotionally, but it no longer left her drained. Dominic was her steady support, helping her balance medicine and motherhood. He funded state-of-the-art equipment for the neurology department, from cutting-edge MRI machines to robotic surgery systems, enabling Mia and her colleagues to perform at their best. "I don't want you to have to choose between your career and Lily," he said one day when she thanked him. "I want you to shine, the way you always do in the OR." His support wasn't about control, it was respect, something Mia once thought he could never offer. Dominic had changed too. He scaled back his role at Blackwell Industries, delegating most responsibilities to his executive team so he could focus on his family. He became a devoted father, taking Lily to the park, reading children's medical books to her, even learning to cook, though his pasta still often came out burnt. Mia watched him, and with each passing day, she saw more of the man she had once loved in college. Not the ruthless CEO, but Dominic from simpler, truer times. But happiness didn't come without challenge. One of the hardest trials was rebuilding the relationship with Dominic's mother, Margaret Blackwell. After Dominic confirmed she had threatened Mia 5 years ago, he cut all ties. But a few months before the wedding, Margaret showed up in Maine, asking to meet her granddaughter. "I want to make things right," she said, her voice stiff but tinged with regret. "Lily is a Blackwell." Mia, with the poise of a surgeon used to making life or death decisions, agreed to meet her, but only with Dominic and with clear boundaries. During a meeting at their home, Mia looked Margaret straight in the eyes. "You nearly destroyed my life," she said calmly but firmly. "We'll let you see Lily, but only if you respect our family. One misstep, and you'll never see her again." Margaret, proud as ever, nodded, and in that moment, Mia saw her own strength, not just as a healer, but as a woman who would protect her family with everything she had. Dominic stood beside her, holding her hand, proud of the woman she had become. They agreed to let Margaret visit Lily occasionally, always supervised, always with caution, ensuring their peace would never be threatened again. The wedding day passed in laughter and tears. Sarah Kim, Mia's dear colleague, flew in from Portland, hugged her tightly and whispered, "You deserve this happiness, Dr. Brooks." Lily, in a tiny white dress, toddled over and wrapped herself around her parents' legs, drawing delighted laughter from the guests. Dominic picked her up, kissed her cheek, then turned to Mia. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for giving me a second chance, for giving us a family." Mia smiled, her eyes glistening in the golden dusk. "Thank you," she replied, "for proving you were worth that chance." They stood there, surrounded by those they loved, the waves gently crashing below them, and for the first time in a long while, Mia felt completely at peace. A month after the wedding, Mia and Dominic moved into a seaside home in Maine, with a sprawling garden where Lily could play. Mia continued working at St. Mary's, expanding her neurosurgery program to serve underserved patients. She also began teaching at a local medical school, mentoring future doctors with the same passion that had once driven her as a student. Dominic supported her fully, managing the healthcare foundation remotely and caring for Lily when Mia's shifts stretched late into the night. Challenges still came. Mia's surgeries sometimes ran past midnight, and Dominic occasionally faced pressure from the Blackwell board. But they learned to share the burden, to argue, to listen, to rebuild. One evening, after Lily had gone to sleep, Mia sat beside Dominic on their porch, staring up at the stars. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked, fingers entwined with his. Dominic smiled and kissed her forehead. "No," he said honestly, "but I knew I'd fight to the end to get here, if it meant having you." He paused, his voice tender. "You're the most brilliant doctor I've ever known, Mia. But more than that, you're the strongest mother, the fiercest wife. I'm so proud of you." Mia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of the man she loved. As a doctor, she had saved countless lives. As a mother, she had protected Lily with every part of her soul. And as a wife, she had learned to forgive, to trust, and to build something beautiful from the ruins. She was no longer Mia of the contract, of fear and pain. She was Mia Blackwell, a gifted surgeon, a devoted mother, and a woman who had found her way back to love. As the moon cast silver light across the sea, Mia whispered, "At last, we're together. Because of love, not hate." Dominic tightened his grip on her hand, and they sat there quietly, knowing that whatever the future held, it would always be worth the fight.